Welcome, everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges as he explores turning the page on his life and yours. Hey, Charlie.
Hi, Paul. It's a pleasure to be with you here again at OC Talk Radio, and I'd like to welcome all our listeners to the next chapter with Charlie. My guest today, Marc Ottestad, is all about connecting people, connecting ideas or patterns, and connecting to God. And he provides strategies to accomplish those connections. Today, Marc and I plan to talk about what I think may be the most undervalued character trait of all great leaders and all people in general, and that character trait is humility. First of all, I would like everyone to consider that leadership is a character trait, or that humility is a character trait which impacts both leading yourself and leading others. And as we talk, you will see that I am becoming more and more convinced that humility is a cornerstone for leading and living a most meaningful life. And Marc Ottestad is a fellow advocate of humility. I'm not an advocate of humility. I don't know about you. Yeah. We're in Southern California for a reason. He's a fellow advocate of humility. Can't read my own writing in self and group leadership. Marc, thank you so much for joining me on the next chapter with Charlie. I'm looking forward to delving into critical yet often discarded personal character trait of living and leading a meaningful life.
Well, thanks, Charlie. It's so great to be here. I love the invitation. I love next chapters, and I think the idea of what's important and how do we become our best version of ourselves. I think humility is right in the middle of that, and I appreciate the invitation and look forward to our conversation.
Yeah, and you were on the show one other time too, right?
I was.
That was good. Now, I'm sorry for my memory, but what we were talking about coaching, weren't we?
I think we were talking about persistence at that time, or perseverance.
Perseverance, okay, perseverance, and as you do in your coaching. And Marc, by the way, everyone is an excellent executive coach, and we will have all of his contact information in the show notes, and we will mention it on air. For the remainder of the show, Marc, I'd like to, one, discover how you define humility, and then two, discuss how we can apply humility as well to the maneuvering around the roadblocks that keep us from humility. And you mentioned some great roadblocks that I think are very helpful to understand. So first of all, Marc, I'd like to ask you a very general question, and it may be too big, so you can break it down as much as you want, and that is, how do you define humility, and what does it have to do with leadership?
Well, thanks, Charlie. I think humility is this outward expression of the inner self, and it happens in relationships with other people. I think it's this sense of human oneness that we all are on this journey, and a humble positioning allows us to really connect with one another. So that's how I see humility. And I was talking to my wife today as I knew we were going to talk, and we had this conversation about, well, how many people do you know in your life that you would tag as humble? I thought it was so interesting because it was not a long list. We were out for a walk.
Really?
And,
really?
Yeah, I was thinking, isn't that interesting that it's not easy for me to say, here's a long list. I certainly had a quality list of people, but it wasn't a long list, that's for sure.
What would be some of the traits by which we might identify somebody as a humble person?
Well, I think there's this openness to listening to other people, that there's this invitation in to allow people to be heard. I think there's a desire to empower other people, to help them on their journey. I think there's a sense of empathy.
Yes, I like that.
Not sympathy.
Right.
I think that's that other side, which kind of has this pride or attached to it, which is, oh, that's too bad that's happening to you. But empathy is kind of that feeling of, well, but there for the grace of God go I, and I can see that is tough.
An attempt to walk in your shoes.
Exactly.
You can never do that, but at least you can attempt to do that, to feel as the other person is feeling. I'll come back to the second half of that question. As I was preparing for this podcast, an idea occurred to me, and you said it right in the beginning. It's an outward reflection of an inner state of being.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking that many people that are not humble people, that are authoritarians, especially in leadership, sort of have a psychological issue that they have to deal with, and that is low self-esteem. And I think it's not uncommon to find people with a sense of low self-worth, low self-value, low self-esteem try to fix that or accommodate that with authority and power and control, and it really doesn't work because people don't like it. So it really gets them further into a hole, but that is the driver. Does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, it certainly does. I mean, I think these are coping mechanisms and kind of codependent, insane things that we do, and we hope to get someplace, and we find ourselves digging a deeper hole rather than finding a way out of a habit or a way that really is hurting us rather than helping us. As you were saying that, I was thinking it kind of is attached to that idea of humility posers, where they, and we've heard it before, well, gosh, I am so humble, it's one of my best traits. And we laugh about that, but there is this, disconnectedness that people would try to easily identify as humble, and yet they really have no idea what they're talking about. And it goes back to what we were talking about before, where they don't listen to other people, they aren't empathic, they aren't open. And the jump that I make in a lot of my work is the challenge how this all manifests itself when we come from a capitalistic society which keeps saying be self-reliant, be self-sufficient, be independent, right. And we keep building up this thinking around us when really the call is to dependence and interdependence. And how do I do that? So in leadership, how do I be bold and assertive and make the right decision and be humble? And I think those are those wonderful tension points that God gives us to say, oh, maybe you better come to me and discuss that thing because we got some work to do here.
Yeah. You made a great quote in one of your writings, and I'm quoting now, and is humility is about thinking of the self less, but not thinking less of the self. Now, let me repeat that because that could be confusing, and I'll add a word. Humility is about thinking of the self less often, but not thinking less of the self. I just love that quote. And that's what we were talking about. Is in humility, it's not thinking so much about the self. The world doesn't revolve around me.
What?
And then, especially in leadership, I've got a dozen to a few hundred to a few thousand people that depend on me. Talk to me about that quote, because it's a brilliant quote.
Yeah, I think the person that's probably most recognized for the quote is C.S. Lewis, and so he's certainly a profound Christian theologian. I've seen Rick Warren given credit for it as well, and you see it on one side or the other. Is it, do you lead with thinking about yourself less, or do you lead with the other side? So I think the idea of really a good discipline, because lots of my work is, well, how do I really grow my humility muscle? How do I increase my capacity to be humble? And so it certainly starts with part of what you're talking about there, which is, well, how much are you thinking about yourself? And is there a way to capture that moment and really think about something else, think about someone else, think about someone else that needs? So that's that kind of attached to gratitude again. Anytime we're feeling bad for our circumstances, we're probably, thinking a whole lot about ourselves. And the minute we turn and look at someone else, all of a sudden we can start being available for gratitude and thankfulness. So I think you kind of talked about it really well. I think when you add that thinking about ourselves less, that discipline is something you can really work on. With that understanding of your identity, who you are, you're unique, you're created in an amazing way, it doesn't mean you think less of yourself. The skills that we're given, the competencies we're given, all of those pieces, we want to continue to grow and increase in and become the best versions that we possibly can.
This really means a lot to me, because I dealt with this in therapy. I've been in therapy half my life, I think, but I don't go as frequently as I used to. But nevertheless, I still have a monthly visit with a therapist, and just to kind of a check-in. And I had a therapist who was with me for probably 2 decades, and he used to use words like, "You're brilliant, you're this, you're that," and there's no way, Mark, I could accept those. And I said, they're just far over what I really am. And yet I had this list of accomplishments that were really quite high, and a list of great relationships. And there was, it came that, I'm not going to say I'm brilliant, but it came to where I came to a much greater appreciation of myself without being prideful. It's not like, oh, I'm proud of this. I feel like it's a gift from God, and I am grateful. And now, not only am I grateful, Mark, I'm responsible. If I have that kind of influence over other people, or not over other people, but an influence with people, and that I am looked at as a leader or someone they want to follow or somebody they want to emulate, I need, I'm accountable to that. I need to take responsibility for that, and I can't act like a high-powered jerk, or it discounts everything. So I guess I want to make the point that you can really be, and I'm going to use the word proud, you can really be proud of yourself and of the things that you've done, and of the work you've done with other people, and the way you've helped other people, and the way you've contributed to society. You can be proud of that and still be humble.
Exactly.
You don't hear that said a lot.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, because certainly in the Christian community, if you use that adjective, you have to stand in fear, because God will humble the proud. But it's really a matter of the heart. Again, the idea of manipulation or controlling others and doing it in an nefarious kind of way, a nefarious kind of way, So I think you're absolutely right. And learning to accept who you are and grow into that's just a gift. So I think finally hearing that enough for you and you being able to go, okay, I'm accepting that, and I love your next step, which is being responsible for it. That you have a responsibility to make the world a better place from whom you are. So step into that and continue to be responsible.
It reminds me of a remotely related quote that I once read from Brad Pitt, and that since he's a kid, he's always been the best-looking kid on the block, and his mother told him, "With this gift comes responsibility," and that was something he learned very, very early, and
that's like Spider-Man. There you go.
Did they say that in Spider-Man?
Yeah,
oh, okay.
Spider-Man moment, yeah.
A Spider-Man moment. Yeah, but it is, so it does not mean thinking, oh, woe is me, oh, lowly me, I'm the dirt of the earth. That I can be a highly productive and highly valued member of society, but recognizing, I think the caveats on there are gratitude and accountability. That we both are have a higher power named God in our life and believe that God endowed us with these gifts, and so there is gratitude for that. And I am accountable not only to people, but I'm accountable to God to honor those gifts that I've been given.
Exactly.
And to do it in a way that contributes to the value of society.
Yeah, I think the advantage of a faith journey, certainly this is one of those moments where it's easy to get humble before God. I mean, I look outside and I see beauty. I step into a hospital, or one of my friends is a doctor doing amazing things. These are all the fingerprint of God. So it's very easy for me to recognize He is God and I am not. Okay, I'm humble. So how do you take that kind of positioning with other people or the people that you lead?
Let's talk about that lead part. What, in your mind, if you can get sort of practical on me and tactical, what does humility look like for a leader? How is a leader successfully humble and still maintain the authority that a leader has and a responsibility more responsibility than authority, but the responsibility a leader has, and demonstrate humility? How does that work?
Well, I think it starts with the unbelievable, challenging ability to listen. I think we're so busy solving things that we miss connecting with people because we don't listen to them. So certainly in leadership, admitting mistakes, crediting others, I think those are two good starting points, and usually around the whole kind of universe of this is listening. So when I work with leaders and there's indications of cultural challenges, usually it moves right into this space of listening or the lack of. And there's this moment, one of my favorite books is The Good Listener. It's by James Sullivan. And we used it, part of my training has been with an organization called Stephen's Ministry. And Stephen's Ministry, they've trained 500,000 caregivers, and you do a male-on-male, let's meet every week for an hour and just allow that other person to throw up on you. And so this idea, which is, I am the caregiver and God is the cure giver, which is just so amazing to watch, because what I do is just listen and allow them to be heard. So when you take that and you move that into the marketplace, and you want people to trust you enough to come out and share magnificent creative ideas or problems that are right in front of the organization. If the leader is not listening, the probability of getting to either of those is diminished greatly. So, yeah, I think we're in that space of really discomfort, because when you talk to leaders, they often have no understanding of what listening even is or how to react when they listen. I had 2 instances this week, which was great, and we're working through a role play with different people, and in the role play, I said, well, how would you move that conversation forward? And in both instances, the two leaders said, why did you do that? And so I go, okay, time out. One of those tips in coaching that's a very easy, tangible takeaway is that in your interactions with other people, don't use the word why. Why is a hugely judgmental question that just stops conversations from moving forward. Use the what and the how and the when as a way to bring people into the conversation, and you may get to the why later on, but if you want the building blocks of somebody being known and heard, if you lead with a why, you'll have yourself a very short conversation, because people will have to defend themselves.
Yeah, especially if that why is why to a person. Why did you do that?
Exactly.
That's moving immediately into a backdoor into blame.
Exactly. Yeah, blame and judgment. Yeah, so those are some of the pieces. So I think those ideas of. Yeah.
I think it is just so important. I was just listening to a YouTube talk with Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro, and they were talking a bit in their thing about spirituality and leadership, and they talked about Genesis 1 and that man and woman are created in the image of God. Not just man, it's man and woman are created in the image of God, and that means all people are created in the image of God, and therefore all people are due respect and honor and appreciation. And if they are created in the image of God.
That does go back to that Good Listener book, which is, while there are many techniques in there, the main message is this is the greatest way for you to show someone else that you value them.
And that's important. That value is important.
They have value. They are valuable. Exactly. It's
absolutely.
Really
I have stated on the podcast in the past, some time ago, I made one of my goals in life just simple, is in conversation and dealing with people, is to help people feel better about themselves, because I don't think they live in a world where other people are making them feel better about themselves. So I try to find ways to compliment them, listen to them, make them the subject of the conversation. And, you can just see their eyes light up that somebody actually gives a rip about them.
Yeah, that's so good. Another one of those techniques which really creates kind of a dissonance for most people is, and it's certainly a coaching technique, but it's certainly a leadership technique, is that in the response to what a person says to you, your response should be, "Tell me more."
Yeah, perfect.
Yes. Or what else? And that you should run that until they say, "No, I think that's it." So if you allow this dance of, here's the first enter into the conversation, and I say, "Well, Charlie, tell me more." Charlie's mind goes, "Really? It's not going to be a ping pong match. I can expand. And Charlie says some more, and then he stops, and I say, "What else?" And Charlie's thinking, "This is just weird. I'm really get a chance to expand on my thinking." And in there is this internal resonance of, I'm being listened to and valued as a human being.
Yes.
So it's we all need to do more listening. I mean, we're certainly back to my instant.
Oh yeah, I'm also into listening, Mark. So you're talking to the choir, because we are more interested in finding in the conversation finding something to say in response, rather than to listening to what the other people have to say. It's fun watching conversations.
Tell me more.
You know, in my quarter of a century of coaching executive business leaders, I've always found, I really have, that the best leaders exercise some form of humility, and that they are willing to listen to other people, they're willing to give praise to other people and reward other people, and they look at the company as a collection of all of these people, not just a means by which they can get their will done. They know the importance of an idea that you write somewhat about, called servant leadership. What would you say is the most prevalent mindset of the humble servant leader? In other words, how does humility and servant leadership impact the way these people view the world?
Well, I guess the word that comes to mind for me is mindset. And I think one of my greatest moments in working, I was working with a venture capital guy, and his comment was, Mark, you know, I've sat in front of thousands of business owners and idea people, and it breaks two ways. It breaks either I discovered it or I discovered what God had already created.
Right.
And that humble positioning of I'm seeking to find what is there. And so I guess servant leadership would be a seek first to understand, would be a consider others better than yourself, would be a...
Covey's Great 7 Habits.
Exactly.
Yeah. I want to go on. We're going to take a brief break, and then I want to come back and I want to take a look at the roadblocks or perhaps inclinations of what might look like, what unhumble, what prideful leadership might look like, and we'll talk about the other side, and I think that will really help give focus on what humble leadership looks like. But before that, let's take a quick break. Hi, this is Charlie Hedges, and you're listening to The Next Chapter with Charlie, and I'm here with Marc Ottestad, and we are talking about what I'm calling a most important trait for leading yourself and others, which is humility. And I think we've made a couple of really interesting observations about humility, and we're going to go into it even in more detail, and that communication and listening and valuing the other person is extremely critical. And we've also talked about that if you are not, I'll go ahead and take the chance to say it. If you are not proud of yourself in a humble way, if you're not proud of your actions, then you have a very difficult time being humble and not authoritative and not controlling. I don't mean proud in the negative sense of pride, but that you are you are contented with what you are doing in life, and that's opposite of what many people are hearing. I want to go on before we go to the leader and individual. I just want to talk about our society, that we do not seem to honor humility as a society at all. I mean, you look at the sports fields and you see all the trash talking, and you score a run or you make a basket or you catch a football, and there's all these antics about how great I am, bringing my number out and my name out, pulling it off my chest like, look how great I am. We live in a society where our kids are inundated with these type of images, and they think that's what they need to be. They need to be, I see it all the time. My son's a professional baseball player, and I see it all the time at the stadium when they do these fan shots, and they show a fan, and rather than just, kind of waving, the fan is out pulling out their name and showing their name and high-fiving themselves and doing muscles and all that, trying to make themselves look great, and it's sickening to me. It's our culture, and I get myself into trouble if I talk about politics because I'm a Republicrat. I fit in between both, but I think we find plenty of people in higher office that are as far from humble as you can get, and that also impacts our society at large. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, it made me think about my wife as a second-grade teacher, and one of the questions that she would have before she retired was, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she was regaling the evolution of, I want to be an astronaut, or I want to be a ball player, to the last couple years of her time in that slot with these 8-year-olds was, I want to be famous. That everybody is wanting to be famous, which is, once again, I don't know if there's more.
No kidding. That's so disheartening.
It is so disheartening. And of course, you want to say, famous for what? What would you do? What might you do to get there? Boy, we're really getting off track. But that's what leads to these shootings and those type of things, because they are trying to get their name. This is the way they're going to. They certainly have built up anger, but it is also they know they're going to get high publicity and they're going to become famous for doing this. Yeah, I think because as my mind was wandering as you were, describing it, I think about sports, and sports is a very leveling experience because everybody loses.
A lot.
There is a lot, right? And so what's nice about sports is, man, you have to persevere to get through to get to those moments, and you certainly want to treasure the moments because, I took a bunch of beatings on the way to get here. But it makes me think about, again, that idea of we're so individual-centric or group-centric versus the whole-centric again. Because if we look at it from the whole, we're all screwed up and dysfunctional.
Right.
And so if we start with the premise of we're all screwed up and dysfunctional versus we're all great, I think the starting point is just wrong, and somehow we've gotten the message, and I certainly see it, again with my wife or my tennis coach, this idea of I don't want to fail, I want to be an expert now. There's this microwave kind of mentality and self-centeredness that I think are the core to what you're talking about.
Yeah, and you talk about sports. You know, the sport I obviously know most about is baseball, and it is it's an incredibly humbling sport. I mean, and it moves from humbling to humiliating at times.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you're the greatest success on the field if you fail 7 out of 10 times.
Exactly.
You know, and you're just as, and my son's agent is a very well-known agent, Scott Boras, says, don't ever think you can beat the game of baseball. The game of baseball is going to beat you every time. Just be ready for that. And I honestly know from my relationships with my son's team that the vast, vast majority of the players are humble and have been humiliated, and they are not, you know, there's always that handful of very pride-oriented players, but they're a small handful. They're the minority. They're the gross minority. They're not the vast minority. I know in baseball. I don't know about other sports. You know, I don't know about basketball and football, you know, the other American sports, but in baseball it is that way, and I'm proud to say that the baseball players I know, my son's friends, are really humble, great young men that, you know, I would be I'm proud to call friend. Go ahead. You were going to say something.
Well, I was just thinking, you know, when you move into, because we're so, you know, political these days, and in that context, this idea of, you know, we're always looking for what's wrong instead of looking for how far we've come. So again, it's kind of this mindset of, gosh, I don't know, you could take, you know, income inequality or women's rights or, you know, lots of the hot topics of the day. And it's sad that we don't start with, it's so good that we made some progress and there's work to do. So there's this zero-sum kind of thinking that permeates that. You know,
that's brilliant. You know, that is so, rather than we're not there, rather than what we don't have, look how far we've come. We still have a long way to go, or maybe not a long way to go, but look how far we've come, and that is true. My wife and I are very involved in the women's movement, and from the 70s, it has come so far. It still has far to go. There's still ways to go, that's for sure. I'm not denying that, but it has come so far, and nobody ever recognizes that the changes have been made.
We need to celebrate some of that, right? And not act as if, you know, we're pridefully thinking there's not work to do. So, yes, I don't know. You know, I think the culture wars are interesting, and I think, again, to me it goes back to that moment of independence versus dependence. I think that idea that I have to do it on my own, I can't rely on anybody else, and those building blocks of that leads to a very isolated, cold world. And so somehow what's nice about humility, again, my wife is hugely impacted by the new, is it Melinda Gates, Bill Gates' wife, book, and her work in poverty.
Right.
And so, you know, and she's a systematic, hugely wealthy person that can't fix it all today and has to do the best she can do, realizing that even with untold wealth, we can't fix it. And so we keep making steps. And so it's a very great resource on mindset. It's back to what you said before. It's about we have responsibility. We have to step into it. And there is this reality, I don't know, Steve Jobs pretty soon is a rail of a person in cancer and can't control it. So you can make a wonderful iPod, thingamajiggy. But at the end of the day, you know, I'm on the older side, so, you know, I watch lots of my friends dying and lots of my
I don't want to get. I'm on the older side too, and that's the downside of the older side. People die.
It's humbling.
I like the way you said that you had another quote that I thought was really good, and you put, a leader with a humble approach lifts people's spirits, self-esteem, and confidence. Man, if we could just do that, if a leader could just do that, lift people's spirits, their self-esteem, their confidence, they're going to be high producers, they're going to love working for you. They're going to love working in this organization, and they're going to love you as a friend. If you do that as a friend, if you lift spirit, self-esteem, and confidence, you're going to be, more and more people are going to want to be friends with you.
Exactly. I think it's so interesting that I, work with lots of people that are trying to figure out their purpose, right? And that may be, gosh, am I making the right widget, and it's all great, trying to think through it. And normally the why is just what you were describing. It's the people. So it's the customers, it's the vendors, it's the employees, it's the friends, it's the family. So how do you influence wherever God placed you to help people have a better life? And you get to do it while you make widgets or while you produce a service. So it's so interesting that often people are so close and so far away that they just don't see it yet. And yet when that switch goes on, and all of a sudden they're going, oh, that's why I'm here, because I happen to be an expert at this software platform, and I can help many people develop an expertise. I can build a culture, and I can allow people, and this is really the heartbeat for me, which is this idea that if we are in the marketplace and we're doing what we're doing and we're doing the best we can, we will be with people when everything falls apart. Because what's going to happen is there are going to be relational challenges, there's going to be financial challenges, there's going to be health challenges. And because we're with people, when that happens, we can walk with them because we happen to have been making widgets for the last 20 years. And so that's that moment that allows us to say, I can't fix it for you, but I can humbly walk with you as you walk through this difficult season. So that is the great mystery for me of God, who would say, okay, Christianity and capitalism, let's go. Look how messy that's going to be. Yeah. And it is messy, and yet it's so wonderful when leaders catch the vision that that's what they get to do every day. They get 40, 50 hours from people, and they walk with them as they, live with a wayward child or deal with a parent that's got dementia. I mean, we all know the long list of whatever's going on. So, yeah,
that's perfect. There are we're coming close to wrapping up the show, and I have too many questions to ask you, but I think these are very important because there's sort of checklists on checking your own humility. And if you have these characteristics, it's a sign that you may not be as humble as you would like to be. And you listed 4 signs of a leader that may demonstrate a lack of a lack of humility. And I find these to be roadblocks. And I'll list them, and we can briefly chat about them. First, are you too focused on your own image? Is life only about you? Secondly, do you search for sources of blame when things go wrong? I see this with the non-humble person. The first thing they want to do is blame someone else. It can't possibly be their own fault. Third, do you frequently lose your temper? And fourth, as you have mentioned, are you a focused listener? So let's just briefly go through these things. Are you too focused on your own image? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the mirror is a treacherous betrayer, and I think as long as you're trying to build that thing up, it's not a good deal. So anytime you got that finger out there, there's 3 or 4 pointing back at you. Yeah, this goes back to what we were talking about before.
Yeah, unless your own image is about humility and about your image is built up by the knowledge that you have built up other people. Then,
good. Yes.
But if it's not that, if it's all about lifting you and you getting awards and you getting raises and you getting promotions, then that is a sign of egoism and certainly not a sign of humility. Now the second one's a big one for me because I have seen this so much. Do you search for sources of blame when things go wrong? We talked about it briefly earlier, but I find this so much in leaders that lack a genuine humility. Is, man, let's just go to who can we blame for this, and rather than searching root causes and saying, what can we learn from this? This problem is an opportunity. None of that is, an opportunity to improve. None of those things are considered by the egotistical or prideful person. They want to blame somebody and just cast a blame and then think it's all over. They've cured it when they fix that person, fire that person, or somehow put them on a PIP. Yeah,
I think you've said it all. I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah, it's a big one. How does losing your temper demonstrate a lack of humility?
Yeah, I think anger is a secondary emotion, so it's not the primary emotion. So coming to a realization as to what is causing me to feel like this, and obviously anger would be the overt action there. So I think it's a great way of being able to see, for a leader, what other people are seeing. Often leaders can't see it until you videotape them and they go, oh my gosh. But often anger is one that's easier to access because it's easy to say, how many times did you lose your temper in the last week, or even keep a log on it and be able to start finding, where that's at. And usually it's about control. People, most often, anger is presented when someone who really wants to control things can't control the outcome. And usually that's connected to these other pieces that we've been talking about.
Yeah, it's funny that you put this. It reminds me of a blog that I just wrote this past week, was against the rise of rudeness. And that's and rudeness comes from also a lack of humility, and it's just my way is the right way, and I'm going to say it rudely. I'm not going to try to be kind. I'm not going to try to work with the people. I think that losing the temper and the rudeness are very close. And now the last one, are you a focused listener? I think we've covered that plenty, but I just don't think we can emphasize it enough, because it is so important to listen. Tell me more. And I like the tell me more rather than asking questions, because many times people say good listening is you're asking questions, but often when we ask questions, we take them off track of where the problem really is. We take them on our track.
Exactly.
Rather than saying tell me more, we're asking for them to be on their track. And tell me.
I think the final piece in there that I'd certainly want to encourage everyone towards is the idea of self-awareness with regards to humility. And we need to invite people in. The reality is that God can supernaturally invade our lives and change us, but I think his A plan is he uses other people to do that. It happens in relationship. He's a relational God who encourages us towards relationships. So you have to be courageous enough to say, I've been thinking about humility, Charlie. It's something that I would really like to work on. Could you help me really assess how you see me in the light of that character trait? And you might do a scale of 1 to 10, or you might say, but I think we need to bring this stuff out into the light and normalize the conversation, and then work towards being more humble ourselves and hopefully creating a more humble world.
That's well stated. Bring it out to the light and make it part of the conversation. That's really great. Well, Marc, I want to tell you it's been such a pleasure talking to you, and I want to thank you for spending time today with me on the next chapter with Charlie. So, and I'm sure we'll have you once again.
Pleasure was all mine.
Okay, and I'd like to encourage our listeners to check out our website at thenextchapter.life. And until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.